We don't always get a clean beginning on revenge sins. Sometimes a story starts with something small that shouldn't matter, and then it does. A strip of fresh metal on an old door, a keypad glowing where a key used to be. Ivy Mercer didn't come to fight. She came to move into the one place her grandfather meant for her to feel safe, and found her family already acting like she had never existed. Here's where she starts. I pulled onto the street and sat there longer than I meant to. The house looked the same from the outside. Same paint, same porch light, same wind chime that always clicked when the air shifted. The driveway didn't look the same. A moving truck was backed in like it belonged there. My brother's car sat behind it, crooked, like he'd parked fast. My dad's truck was near the garage. The side door was propped open with a cardboard box. I took my hands off the steering wheel and tried to steady my breathing. I had one box in the back seat. Kitchen stuff. A towel. A framed photo of my grandfather in his garden. I got out and walked up the driveway. My dad was on the porch with a drill. He had a keypad lock in his palm like he was installing a new habit. When he noticed me, his shoulders tightened. Then he kept working. My mom stepped out first, like she'd been waiting behind the door. "Ivy, stop right there. I'm moving in." Her face didn't shift. "No, you're not. Inside." I heard a loud scrape. Then my brother appeared in the doorway carrying a boxed lamp, the kind my grandfather kept on the side table. Logan paused when he saw me. "Oh, hey." My dad set the drill down carefully, like he didn't want it to make a sound. "This is already handled." "What's handled?" My mom's voice sharpened. "Your grandfather would have wanted Logan here. He needs stability." I stared at the keypad lock, at the screws lined up on the porch rail. "That's my front door." My dad stepped closer. Not all the way into my space, but close enough. Family property belongs to the family. I held the box tighter and felt the edge cut into my fingers. "I'm family." My mom made a small laugh that didn't carry any warmth. "You have an apartment. Logan has nothing." Logan shifted the lamp box in his arms. "They're just helping me get set up. It's not like I'm trying to take anything from you." My dad's jaw moved like he was chewing words before letting them out. "You don't outrank your father." For a second, everything inside me went quiet. I heard the wind chime. I heard the truck idling. I heard my own pulse. I set my box down on the porch step. "I'm calling my attorney." My mom waved a hand like I'd threatened to call a babysitter. "Don't be dramatic." I pulled out my phone anyway. I didn't look at Logan when I dialed. I didn't look at my mom's face when she leaned in. My dad watched my screen like he could stop the call by staring hard enough. When the line connected, my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Daniel, I'm at the Tacoma house. They're here. My dad is changing the locks." A beat. Then, "Stay where you are. Do not engage. I'm on my way, and I'm calling law enforcement." My mom's eyes widened. "You're calling the police." My dad's mouth pulled tight. "You're going to do this to your own family." I kept my phone to my ear. "You were changing my locks. We've heard a lot of families claim they're acting out of love." In that moment, you could hear how quickly love turned into possession. My brother's voice went softer. "Ivy, come on. We can talk about it." I looked at him finally, at the lamp box pressed to his chest like a shield. Not like this. I picked my box back up, stepped off the porch, and stood on the walkway, close enough to see the new lock, far enough to keep my hands from shaking too much. If this story stays with you, subscribing helps keep quiet voices like hers from getting buried. The moving truck kept humming. My dad picked up the drill again, then set it down, then picked it up again, like he couldn't decide which version of himself he wanted to be when the deputy arrived. While I waited for Daniel and whoever he was sending with a badge, I stood at the edge of the driveway and tried not to replay everything that had led to this. It never started with a house. It started with a sentence. I was 13 when I heard it. I wasn't supposed to. I'd come downstairs for water and stopped when I heard my dad's voice in the kitchen. "Ivy will be fine," he told my mom. "Logan needs the investment. Investment. like we were accounts. The next year, Logan got a brand new truck for his 17th birthday. $52,000. Red. My dad tossed him the keys in the driveway like it was a ceremony. "You're a man now," he told him. When I turned 17, my parents handed me an envelope. Inside was a brochure for the state university and a list of scholarship deadlines. "You're smart," my mom said, brushing my hair back. "You'll figure it out." I did. Loans, 3 jobs, late nights. I don't remember anyone tossing me keys. When Logan got into a private college in Oregon, my dad called it an opportunity. Tuition, housing, meal plan, they covered all of it. When he dropped out halfway through sophomore year, they called it finding himself. When I graduated with $84,000 in student loan debt, they called it character building. A car door slammed in the present, pulling me back. Logan stepped closer, rubbing the back of his neck. "You didn't have to bring lawyers into this," he muttered. "Dad's just trying to keep things stable. For you," he gave a small shrug, "I'm not asking for everything. Just the house." "Just the house? You already got Grandpa's car and the coin collection?" "That's not the same." I let out a breath. "You've gotten help your whole life." He flinched a little. "That's not my fault. I didn't say it was. It wasn't. Not completely." He grew up hearing the same thing I did, just from the other side of it. Family helps family. That was my dad's favorite line. He used it when Logan's legal trouble cost $37,000. He used it when rehab ran another $28,000. He used it when he asked me to lend $15,000 once to help with cash flow. He never used it when I was behind on rent in my first apartment. Logan looked toward the porch where my parents were whispering. "I don't know how to start over," he admitted, barely above a murmur. I swallowed that instinct to fix it. It had been trained into me for years. The truck engine cut off. The sudden quiet felt heavier than the noise had. The first time my grandfather ever showed me how to use a file cabinet, I was maybe 10. He crouched beside me in his small home office, the room that always smelled faintly like coffee and old paper. "Paperwork," he told me, tapping a folder into place, "is how quiet people protect themselves." I didn't understand it then. I just liked sitting in that room with him while he labeled things in neat block letters. Arthur Mercer had been a Marine before he became an estate planning paralegal. He woke up at 5 every morning. He folded his laundry with sharp corners. He paid his bills on the 1st of the month even if they weren't due until the 15th. He noticed everything. He noticed when I started working 2 jobs in college. He noticed when Logan stopped calling unless he needed something. He noticed the way my dad's voice changed whenever money came up. About 6 years before he died, he refinanced this house. I didn't know why at the time. I assumed it was routine. One night, while we were washing dishes together, he dried his hands and leaned against the counter. "Your father needed help again." I kept scrubbing. How much he didn't answer right away. He looked tired, in a way that didn't have anything to do with age. $48,000 for tuition gaps, $37,000 for legal fees, $28,000 for rehab. It adds up. "It shouldn't be on you." He gave a short breath, almost a laugh. "It shouldn't." Later, I found out there was more. A home equity line of credit when my parents were behind on their mortgage. Another $41,000 to keep them from foreclosure. Every time, there was paperwork, promissory notes, signatures, dates. He never waved it off as a gift. They promised to repay. He told me once, sliding a folder back into the drawer, "I document promises." A few months before he passed, he called me over on a Tuesday evening. I'd just come off a hospice shift. I still smelled like hospital sanitizer. He sat at the kitchen table with a stack of documents in front of him. "I've updated the trust." I felt my stomach tighten. "Grandpa, you don't have to. I know exactly what I have to do." His voice wasn't angry. It was steady. "Ivy, you've never asked me for rescue. Not once. You built your own life. I'm not going to let that be punished." I stared at the papers. "Dad's going to lose it. Arthur looked straight at me. That's not your responsibility. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. This house isn't a reward. It's a foundation. Back in the driveway, watching my father handle a drill like he owned the air around him, I could almost hear my grandfather's voice in that kitchen. Documentation protects the quiet ones. The day we sat in Daniel Hargrove's office, the air felt heavy even before he opened the folder. Logan kept bouncing his knee under the table. My mom had both hands folded in her lap like we were at church. My dad stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Daniel adjusted his glasses and began in a steady tone. The Arthur Mercer Revocable Living Trust. Last amended 6 months prior to his passing. He read through the formal language first. Successor trustee, distribution instructions, administrative provisions. It all sounded distant and official. Then he got to the house. The property located in North Tacoma, currently valued at approximately $1,270,000, is to be distributed outright to Ivy Mercer, who is named sole successor trustee and primary beneficiary. My dad's head snapped toward me. That's not correct. Daniel didn't look up from the page. It is. Silence pressed into the room. Logan leaned forward. Wait. The whole house? Yes. The house is owned by the trust and transfers to Ivy as successor trustee. My mom's voice sharpened. Arthur wouldn't cut his own son out. Daniel folded his hands over the document. Mr. Mercer amended this trust 3 separate times in the last 4 years. Each amendment reaffirmed this decision. That landed harder than the valuation. 3 times. My dad's face flushed. He was old. People get confused. He executed the amendments with counsel present. Daniel replied evenly. He was evaluated for capacity. There were no findings of impairment. Logan sat back slowly. So what do I get? The 2018 Subaru Outback and the coin collection. The appraised value of the collection is approximately $57,000. And my parents? My mom pressed. The trust provides no distribution to Calvin or Janet Mercer. My dad pushed his chair back slightly, the legs scraping against the floor. That's not what he wanted. Daniel met his eyes. It is precisely what he documented. I could feel everyone looking at me, like I'd engineered the whole thing in secret. My mom turned toward me, her voice lower now. You've been over there every week. You don't think that influenced him? I kept my hand still on the table. I took him to doctor's appointments. You were always there, she insisted. Daniel stepped in before I had to answer. Arthur Mercer met with me alone on each amendment. No beneficiary was present. Logan exhaled through his nose. So she gets the house and almost $400,000 in brokerage and cash. The numbers hung in the room. I didn't feel rich. I felt exposed. My dad stood. This isn't over. Daniel closed the folder calmly. The trust is legally binding. And that was the moment everything shifted. Daniel arrived faster than I expected. His sleek sedan pulled up behind the hulking moving truck, and he stepped out with a slim leather briefcase tucked under his arm like he had spent his entire career preparing for this exact afternoon. My dad watched him approach, his grip on the drill tightening as he muttered something venomous under his breath. Daniel gave me a brief, reassuring nod before turning his professional gaze toward my parents. Calvin, Janet, this is unnecessary. Daniel, my mother replied. Her arms crossed so tightly over her chest it looked painful. This is a family matter. We are just helping Logan get settled into the family home. Daniel did not argue. He simply set his briefcase on the hood of his car and clicked it open. Inside were folders organized with the kind of terrifying precision my grandfather had loved. I have a certified copy of the trust agreement, Daniel began, his voice cutting through the humid Tacoma air. I also have the recorded deed showing the property titled in the name of the Arthur Mercer Revocable Living Trust, with Ivy Mercer named as the sole successor trustee. This gives her total legal control over this residence and its access. My father let out a harsh, dry laugh. You think a few scraps of paper decide who belongs in this family in matters of property law and estate management? Daniel answered coolly. Those scraps of paper decide everything. Logan shifted uncomfortably behind our father, his eyes darting between the lawyer and the half-assembled bed frame in the garage. Dad, maybe we should just slow down and talk about this. Be quiet. Logan, Calvin snapped, his face reddening. We are not leaving. This house is $1,270,000 of Mercer history. It does not just belong to one child because of a technicality. That was when the patrol vehicle turned onto the street. There were no flashing lights or sirens, just a slow, predatory roll that ended at the curb. Deputy Sophia Ramirez stepped out, her boots crunching on the gravel as she adjusted her duty belt. Afternoon, she said, her voice a practiced neutral. We received a dispatch regarding a property dispute and a potential unauthorized entry. Daniel stepped forward and handed her the documents. Deputy, this property is held in a revocable living trust. Ivy Mercer, standing right here, is the lawful successor trustee. These individuals have entered the premises without her consent and are attempting to occupy it by force. Deputy Ramirez scanned the certificate of trust. The address on the recorded deed matches the property. Sir, she looked at my father, do you have any documentation, a lease, a deed, or a court order showing you have a right to be on this land? This was my father's house for 40 years, Calvin shouted. That is a relationship. Sir, not a title, Deputy Ramirez replied. She checked her tablet, cross-referencing the county database. Pierce County records confirm the trust and Ivy Mercer's designation. If you do not have a counter document, you are currently trespassing. My mother's voice went shrill. We are family. We even moved the utilities into Logan's name this morning to show he lives here. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Deputy, please note that they fraudulently represented themselves to the utility companies to gain access. That constitutes intentional interference with trust assets. The deputy's hand moved toward her belt. It was a subtle gesture, but the air in the driveway suddenly felt very cold. At this point, if you refuse to vacate immediately, this becomes criminal trespass. I will have to take you into custody. The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear the wind chime clicking on the porch, a sound that used to mean safety, but now felt like a countdown. Logan broke first. He looked at the deputy, then at the handcuffs on her belt. Dad, I'm not going to jail for a house. Let's just go. Calvin's jaw worked for several seconds. Finally, he bent down, picked up his drill, and threw it into his truck bed. We will handle this in probate court. Ivy, you will not get away with stealing from your brother. I'm not the one who took things that weren't mine. Dad, I said, my voice finally finding its strength. They walked to their vehicles without a backward glance. Logan lingered for half a heartbeat, looking at the house like he was seeing a ghost, before climbing into the U-Haul. As the truck pulled away, Deputy Ramirez looked at me. Change the locks today. All of them. And I'd suggest a security system with 100% camera coverage. I will, I whispered, clutching the keys. As her car pulled away, I realized for the first time that the door was finally mine to close. Daniel did not leave right away. He remained on the porch while I stood there clutching the heavy brass keys the locksmith had just handed me. The broken remains of the old lock lay scattered on the wooden steps like shrapnel from a small, private war. There is something else. Ivy, Daniel said quietly, his eyes fixed on the driveway where the dust from my father's truck was still settling. My shoulders tensed instinctively. More than what happened today. Yes. He opened his briefcase again, moving slower this time. This was not a gesture meant for a deputy. It was for me. He pulled out a thick, black binder. Inside were dozens of tabs organized by dates, with my grandfather's distinct, disciplined handwriting copied neatly onto every labeled divider. Arthur asked me to keep these organized in case you met with significant resistance, Daniel explained. Resistance, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Daniel nodded. Financial documentation. He called it an accounting of a lifetime of bailouts. He flipped to the first section. $48,000 for Logan's tuition shortfall during his second year. Arthur did not just write a check. He made your father sign a promissory note. He turned to the next tab. $37,000 for a legal defense fund after Logan's second driving under the influence arrest. Arthur insisted on documenting every penny of the settlement fees. My stomach tightened as he continued to flip. $28,000 for an 80-day inpatient rehabilitation stay, and finally, $41,000 through a home equity line of credit that Arthur took out specifically to prevent your parents from defaulting on their own mortgage 4 years ago. I leaned heavily against the porch railing. He refinanced his own home, because of them, totaling $154,000. Daniel said gently, "They never repaid a single cent. Not $1. Arthur included a clause stating these were advancements on their inheritance. Since the total exceeded any amount he intended to leave them, their remaining share is $0. I felt a stinging heat rise behind my eyes. It was a crushing weight of grief for a man who had spent his retirement being a silent safety net for people who never thanked him. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. My father's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated before answering. "What?" "Dad." His voice came through sharp. "You embarrassed us in front of a deputy. Ivy, you treated your own blood like a common criminal. You were changing the locks on a house that isn't yours," I replied. "That house was built on family sweat." Calvin snapped. "I helped your grandfather with a dozen repairs. I maintained that property." "You maintained it with his money," I said, my voice finally finding a cold, steady edge. "And while you were doing repairs, you were draining his life savings. $154,000 worth of exhaustion." "Dad." Silence fell over the line. Then my mother's voice drifted in the background. "Tell her she is tearing this family apart." "Calvin." Daniel stepped closer, speaking loud enough for the microphone to catch his words. "Mr. Mercer, the documentation is meticulous. Any further attempt to interfere with trust assets will result in a civil suit to recover that $154,000 in full, plus interest." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. Daniel met my eyes with a look of somber validation. He may still attempt to file a petition alleging undue influence or a lack of capacity, but Arthur recorded a video statement 1 month before he passed. He was 100% lucid. I looked at the binder again, pressing it against my chest. I finally understood that my grandfather had not just left me a building. He had left me the proof that I owed them nothing. The official envelope came 2 weeks later, thick paper, my parents' names listed as petitioners. I sat at the kitchen table with it unopened for a minute. The new lock was installed. The house was quiet, too quiet. When I finally read it, the words felt clinical. Petition alleging undue influence. Allegation of lack of capacity. Request for trust invalidation. I forwarded it to Daniel without adding anything. He called within 10 minutes. This was expected. "They're saying I manipulated him. They have to prove that you exerted coercion," Daniel replied evenly. "We have the video of the final amendment. We have the physician evaluations. We have my testimony." I closed my eyes briefly. "They're going to drag this out." "No, this is a preliminary petition. The court will first determine whether they have standing and sufficient evidence to proceed." The hearing was brief. I sat in the back, hands folded in my lap, listening as my father's attorney spoke about concern and confusion and family misunderstanding. Daniel stood when it was his turn. The trust was amended in my presence. Arthur Mercer met privately with counsel. 2 physicians provided written assessments confirming full testamentary capacity. The petitioners present no evidence of undue influence beyond speculation. The judge reviewed the documents in silence for several minutes. Then, without drama, she looked up. "The petition is dismissed for failure to establish probable cause. Court costs are assessed to the petitioners." That was it. My father didn't look at me when he left the courtroom. My mother kept her eyes straight ahead. Daniel gathered his folders calmly. It's done. I nodded, but my chest felt tight anyway. Outside, the air felt thinner than it should have. The house felt different after the hearing. Not louder, not warmer, just settled. I sat at the same kitchen table where my grandfather had shown me the trust documents and opened my laptop. The brokerage account balance was still unreal to look at. $382,000. Cash reserves, $146,000. Numbers that could change things. My phone buzzed. Logan. I let it ring once, then answered. I heard. He began quietly. About the court. It's over. He exhaled. Dad's furious. I know. There was a long pause. I'm not calling to fight, he added. I don't know how to fix this. I stared at the checkbook in front of me. Blank page. Clean line. You're not asking for money, I said. No, he replied quickly. Then, softer. Not exactly. I pulled the pen toward me anyway. Ivy. I'm serious. I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. I wrote his name on the top line. 50,000. The number looked small compared to everything else. Manageable. I could help you get an apartment, I murmured. More to myself than to him. You don't owe me anything, Logan said, almost defensive. I just thought maybe we could talk. I thought about my grandfather at this table, the refinance paperwork, the quiet way he'd said he was tired. I looked down at the check. I can have dinner with you. I told Logan, we can talk about jobs, about next steps. Silence on the other end, but I'm not funding you. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay, he answered finally. I tore the check in half. Then again. The paper made a soft ripping sound that felt louder than it should have. Tomorrow night, he asked. Tomorrow. When I hung up, I brushed the torn pieces into the trash and sat there for a minute with my hands flat on the table, feeling the wood grain under my palms. It was the first time I'd chosen not to fix something. 6 months later, the house feels like mine in a way that isn't loud. The floors still creak near the hallway, and the kitchen faucet drips if I do not turn it tight enough. The old cedar fence in the backyard leans a little more than it should. I haven't fixed everything yet. I have realized I do not need to. I paid off $62,000 of my student loans the very first month after the brokerage account transferred to my name. I chose not to clear the entire balance of $84,000 immediately. Instead, I wanted to move slowly, maintaining a high credit score while keeping my cash liquid for the inevitable maintenance an older home requires. I kept the remaining $382,000 invested exactly the way Daniel suggested, a conservative allocation with a 0.5% management fee. Nothing flashy, just steady growth. I also established a small scholarship in my grandfather's name through a local community foundation. It provides $2,500 annually to first-generation college students in Pierce County. It isn't a massive endowment, but it doesn't need to be. It is a seed. My parents have not called since the judge dismissed their petition. Logan, however, came to dinner the night after our phone conversation. He stood on the porch with his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, looking at the new keypad lock like he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch it. I brought salad, he muttered, holding up a plastic container from the grocery store. We ate at the kitchen table in a silence that felt heavy but not hostile. He talked about a warehouse job he had applied for that paid $22 per hour. I told him about a hospice patient I had lost that week. We did not mention the court hearing. We did not mention the $154,000 in debt. Halfway through the meal, he looked around the room. It feels different here now. It's quieter, I said. He nodded slowly. Grandpa would have liked that. He hated the noise. When he left that night, he didn't ask me for a single dollar. I have learned that quiet can feel unfamiliar when you have spent 32 years used to constant crisis. I used to think being the stable one meant absorbing everyone else's chaos. Now, the house holds that weight for me. Some nights, I sit at the table and remember my father telling me I didn't outrank him. I realize now that Arthur Mercer didn't just leave me a house. He gave me the structural integrity to stand still. My life isn't glamorous. I still work the same job. I still drive a car with high mileage. But for the first time, the ground beneath me is solid.